Okay, great. Sally, why don't you go ahead and get
Yeah.
things started?
So, hi, welcome everybody. I just want to say a great big thank you. As Hilary said, we appreciate that, evening times in the December on the run up to Christmas are just very busy. And so we really appreciate that you've taken this time to join us for our webinar today. Just on what we very briefly just spoke about, we never mind background noise. We never mind videos with kids running around in the background. We are smart families and we are family, we have our own families. We're all home with our families. So, if any point, you wanted to like jump in and respond or ask a question, please know that there is never any shame if you've got a busy family life going on behind you. Like I say, I have my children at home with me who are all working quietly in different areas, but the same goes for me. You will probably at some point hear one of my children as well. So we have designed this to be a kind of an interactive webinar. So I will be periodically asking some questions or maybe some prompts. So with the chat is available. When I start sharing my screen, I won't be able to see you all, but Hilary's going to be watching the chat box for me. This is my colleague Hilary. So, she can kind of call out. Please feel free to interrupt me. I have a background as a teacher, and so I am very used to interruptions from my students. And so please, if there's anything you want to share with me, anything you want, to respond to, please feel free. I'd love this to be as interactive as possible. And I don't want to be the only one talking. And part of why we've set up this webinar is for us to also hear from you as well. So I am going to start with a little bit of a question. I know and appreciate some of you are busy, but if any of you do have chance. So the title of our webinar today is Mom, I want a smartphone. And so I'm curious to know, who do we have here in the webinar with us? So are you a parent who has a child who has asked you that question already? Are you a parent who maybe is anticipating hearing that question in the future? So please feel free to share on the chat. Kind of an outline of what we're going to speak about this evening. I'm going to start with a little bit of information on the neuroscience that underpins a lot of the mission that we have here at Smart Families. Some of you may have been to a presentation and seen Dr. Collier, who is, a wonderful, wonderful and huge supporter of our organisation. And she also does a lot about the neuroscience that really, underpins what we're teaching today. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a neuroscience. If you haven't seen it before, it'll kind of give you a little bit of a scope about what the rest of the webinar content is going to be. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about values and something, just to talk about responses that we have to the question. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some tech time plan, prepping for the holidays. And then finally, I'm just going to share with you some ideas on our gift guide that we released last week. So that's kind of what we're doing. And thank you so much. I can see there's already some conversation going in the chat. We know maybe you've heard this question once, maybe you've heard this question hundreds of times about having a smartphone. So this will hopefully just give you a little bit of framework about some possible ways that you can respond to that. So I'm going to let Hilary man the chat room. Sorry, I just realised I didn't introduce myself. My name is Sally. I am the Programme Director for Smart Families. So a lot of the content that you receive in newsletters, kind of webinars and trainings, it's myself that puts all these together. I also speak a lot to the counsellors at the schools where your children attend. I am kind of feet on the ground, finding out what's been going on within the schools with regards to smartphones. And so I use a lot of what I hear, and I use a lot of the feedback that I hear from parents to help kind of guide me on what the topics are that we're going to cover for our content. So this is why I love to have opportunities like this. I love having conversation with parents. I love hearing feedback. I also really am a big a huge supporter of sharing ideas. And so, I'm going to share some of our ideas, but if there is something that has worked well for your family, something maybe a way that you've responded, then please feel free to just share that with us. As the more we can equip each other with kind of practical skills that help us navigate this, sometimes it can feel very turbulent. With the questions and the high emotions around smartphones. So yeah, the more we can collaborate, the better. So, okay, without further ado, thank you, Hilary, for watching the chat for me. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to pull up our presentation and I'm going to just minimize this down here. I'm going to put you down there. Okay, so I'm going to start from here. Oh, wonderful. Okay, so we started putting this together because we were really thinking about, as we were coming up to Christmas time and people were started thinking about gifts, and just kind of some, conversation around how we we know that gift giving, gift or buying for gifts for children and families can sometimes be a little bit difficult, and especially if you're hearing a smartphone question and you're not in your family, you're not ready for that decision to be made to give your child a smartphone. And so we kind of chose this little graphic on the front because we don't want anybody to unwrap a nightmare this Christmas. We don't want to feel anybody to feel pressured into having to buy something that they don't feel ready, that their family is able to kind of navigate through. So this is just our entrance to the conversation. Okay, then the first few slides I'm going to go over are just a little bit of information about brain development. The neuroscience is a really important topic when it comes to reasons why we can explain to our children why our families are not ready to have a smartphone in the family. At Smart Families, our messaging and what we kind of communicate to parents is that delay until after 8th grade. And so the next few slides will kind of go over a little bit of that so you understand why that is our messaging. Okay, so early adolescence, so we're talking kind of early teens when like puberty begins. So is a time of some very unique brain restructuring for adolescent brains. And so it's so unique that we can't really describe an adolescent brain as like an older child brain, and nor can we say it's a younger adult brain. So the things that are happening during adolescence are so unique to adolescence that this is why we talk about this topic so much. So the way that the brain develops is it develops from the back to the front, which is really important when we think about the behaviors that we see at different times during the adolescent period. So I will like to share with you all, I have an 8th grader and I have a 6th grader and I have a 3rd grader. And so I personally am walking through this adolescence with my 8th grader, he's 13. And so you may notice, and we put typical behaviors, they're not always typical, but some common behaviors that maybe some people can relate to. I myself can relate to these personally too. So you may have a teenager who maybe has difficulty holding back or controlling their emotions, a preference for physical activity, or even high excitement or low effort activities. Particularly in boys in this age group, we see the onset of kind of gaming. They start to kind of find the gaming world. Poor planning and judgment. So if you have any adolescents who are, trying to put plan together for homework, this may be an area of conflict, just because their brains and the way that they're developing just mean that they're not able to think quite in the same way that we would as adults, and so their planning and judgment isn't quite the same as ours. They may think or rarely think of any kind of negative consequences, and you may see them engaging in some risky and impulsive behaviors. And so this isn't just restricted to the adolescent period, but this is where we see a surge of these kinds of behaviors. So let me tell you why. Now, many years ago, when neuroscientists were looking at brain development, so they recognized, and this was understood for many years, that there is a window of opportunity that falls between birth and 3 years old. And neuroscientists believe that anything that happened to a child between those 3 years was so critical and so pivotal that it would almost hardwire the brain for the rest of the child's life. For example, if there was a child who experienced some form of trauma, scientists believe that that trauma had maybe been part of the brain structuring, and then that would continue for the rest of the child's life. Now, UNICEF, they did a huge body of research recently looking at adolescent brain development, and they found some really fascinating findings, and that they actually found that there is a second window of opportunity, and this window of opportunity falls typically between the ages of 9 and 14. And so puberty kind of initiates this intense brain restructuring. And so you may notice that kind of between the ages of 9 and 14 is around the period, and we hear a lot of feedback from parents to kind of corroborate this, is the age that parents may think that their child is ready for a smartphone. Now, we know that what you pour into a child in this particular second window of opportunity is really, really critical. And all the research and statistics, and I mean, there's a huge surge of information on smartphones and how adolescents are utilizing them, show that children at this age in this window, just because of the brain development, which I'm going to talk about next, just don't have the correct skills yet to be able to safely navigate a lot of the things that a smartphone provides to them. So the second window of opportunity, I'm going to come back to this in a little bit later on, but I just wanted to share. So what is happening in a child's brain? So the brain is developing from the back to the front. And so between the ages around 10 and 12, the limbic system is the part that comes online. And if you have seen Dr. Collier present, she will often say that this is almost like the accelerator or the gas pedal. And so this drives intense emotions and feelings of reward. It also promotes novelty seeking, risk taking, and there's a shift towards interacting with peers. So they become much more socially connected to their friends. So this is just this area of the brain is located at the side. And so this really drives an adolescent's behavior choices at this age. Now, another part of the brain that's very critical when we're thinking about adolescent behaviors is the prefrontal cortex. And so we have the limbic system from the previous slide, and this is the accelerator or the gas pedal. And so we then have the prefrontal cortex, which is found located kind of above the eyebrows towards the front of the head. Now, this part develops after the limbic system. And why this is so significant is it's the prefrontal cortex that really helps a child to think about and consider the consequences to their behavior. So if you think of the limbic system as the gas pedal, well, then the prefrontal cortex can almost be thought of as the brake. So it's the bit that kind of says, stop, pause, is this a good idea? And this part of the brain isn't fully developed until around mid-20s, so around 25 years old. So you can see there's this kind of very an override of the accelerator pedal, and really the brain, the part of the brain that helps to mitigate the brake pedal is just not online just yet. Now, what this can look like for an adolescent or, a young teen is that if it looks good, smells good, feels good, then they are more prone to indulge in that kind of behavior. And this can include risky behavior too. Now, the prefrontal cortex is also where some of the highest cognitive and emotional control networks are being constructed. And this executive function kind of buzzword has become something that a lot of people in education have been speaking about. So these kind of skills, and you can see them in the boxes on your screen. So they're things like making decisions, solving problems, regulating emotions, being able to focus their attention. Now, these things, we aren't born with these skills, but we are born with the capacity to develop these skills. And the way that children and adolescents learn how these skills and really get them developed is by having them modeled to them, and then also from them having the opportunity to practice these skills. Again, I'm going to come back to this shortly, but it's the prefrontal cortex that is part of this skill, where these skills get developed. So that's those. And so we have kind of at this point touched on a few things that neuroscientists like to call a developmental mismatch. And so the image on your screen, you'll see the purple area of the brain is the limbic system. And so this is something that comes online around puberty. It's kind of the risk-taking, thrill-seeking part of the brain. And or the accelerator part of the brain. And then you'll see the green area of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which isn't fully mature until 25. And so at the bottom, you'll kind of see a little bit of a graph to show that there's this developmental mismatch. Again, this area is typically an area when, or a time when a parent would maybe decide that their child would be ready for a smartphone. And this information, which I've been giving you so far, is going to feed very nicely into some of the responses and how we can speak to the children if they do ask us this question. Just the last couple of slides on brain development. You may be familiar with kind of a well-known principle. It's called the use it or lose it principle. And what this talks about is how when a child is growing and they're very young, they will soak up information and they will be learning anything and everything they can do. When I was in my teaching role, I would often hear, parents describe how their child is like a sponge. They're just soaking up all this information. And that's exactly what they're supposed to do when their younger brain is developing. Now, when we get to the second window of opportunity, so kind of typically between the ages of 9 and 14, scientists discovered this amazing thing that happened whereby all of these synapses or connections that were growing between the neurons, they found that the ones that we used the most remained in place and got strengthened. But the parts of the brain that were not being used, the brain pruned those things away. And so what this can look like typically is if you have a child who's learning a new language and they are practicing a lot, those parts of the brain are getting strengthened and those connections are getting strengthened. But then if you equally have a child who is not practicing something regularly, then that part of the brain will be pruned away. So it's really very fascinating, a lot of really great information online if you were interested to learn more about this. Now, as parents, what we need to consider is the experiences that we are providing for our children. Like, what is it that we want them to use the most and strengthen? And so, like I mentioned, it could be things like, learning an instrument or a new skill. But I also want to just share with you that even things like having really good quality family time, the more that a child is able to experience that, the better they get at it. And then also that's the part of their brain that will get strengthened. So it isn't that people have to go out, and put, sign them up for a sport. I mean, there's absolutely lots of value in things like that, but we can even just think about family experiences. So that is our use it or lose it principle. And then finally, dopamine may be something that you're familiar with. Often people associate this word with reward. Now, dopamine is a naturally occurring chemical that's produced by our brains. And yes, it has a lot to do with reward, but it also has a lot to do with motivating behavior. When I give this presentation, I typically explain about how, as a parent, say you've just come home from a long day and you sit down and you get your phone out and then you start scrolling on social media and you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes on social media, then I'm going to get up and do something else. Or, you've got something else, another task that you need to do. Or, once you're locked into this social media, platform, and then, these algorithms keep showing you these videos that are interesting to you. And then 10 minutes becomes 20 minutes, maybe 20 minutes becomes 30 minutes. And then before you know it, you've been sitting here for an hour and you've lost an hour of your day and you haven't done anything that you wanted to do. Now, it is dopamine that keeps that motivating behavior there. It's the dopamine part of what we absorb from social media that keeps us doing that behavior. Now, I don't know anybody else, but I am very guilty of doing this at times too. And, I don't come away feeling very rewarded or particularly any pleasure of of having wasted my day. So it's just really interesting when we consider as well what an adolescent's brain looks like with regards to dopamine, because what we know is that adolescent brains produce more dopamine and are also more sensitive to the chemical than adult brains. So that means that when these children are on smartphones and they're using apps or maybe social media, their brains are actually far more sensitive to these dopamine dumps. And we live in a culture of, overconsumption. And so, it's really just something to be very mindful of when it comes to exposure through smartphones. So that was a very, very short kind of overview of the neuroscience that kind of underpins our mission here at Smart Family. So Hilary, I can't see my screen, but I was wondering, I'm just going to pause here. I did ask the question at the beginning whether there was anybody who's been asked the question about having a smartphone. I just was wondering, were there any responses in the chat about, has there anybody who has had that question asked already?
No, I'm glad you asked. So we had one participant share that she had been asked many times and now or recently, and feel free, whomever, I'll look back at the chat to get your name, but purchased a Gab phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I congratulated her and explained the Gab phone is a dumb phone. It looks just like an iPhone, actually.
Yeah.
We have one here at my home, and Sally's going to talk a little bit about that and what's called our smart solution. But um, it's a really, really great way for your children to still have access to you. It can text and it can call, and some of them actually also have music capabilities on it. And that's it. That's what the phone does. It's just a phone with texting. And so thank you for sharing that
Yeah, thank
to
you.
the individual who did so, because that's exactly what we want to hear.
Yes, wonderful. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so I'm going to move on now. The next section is just going to talk about what can we say? What is the framework of how we can respond when we get asked, can I have a smartphone? Um, Now, I just want to kind of give some context to this. Depending on the age of your child, that will also, differ the kind of response that you give. Also, where they ask the question. So it could be that you are walking past like an AT&T store and you just kind of get ambushed with like, I want a smartphone. Or it could be that you are at home having a family discussion. So the next few things I'm going to talk about, I'd just love you to kind of reflect on, have you been asked the question before, or, are you anticipating being asked the question? But a lot of what I'm going to share is just like a kind of a generalized framework that hopefully you can kind of take from and, adapt it and make it suitable for your family. Okay, so before I talk about responses that we can give to the question, if we've been asked that question or anticipating the question, I just wanted to pause and talk a little bit about family values. So, when we think about family values, this can be something as parents that we kind of have some, general idea about. But when I was researching about family values, I found that only 3 out of 10 families ever really sit down and intentionally talk about what their family values are. And all the research tells us that when we take time to write things down, then it actually works to give some kind of guide or framework to, what expectations we have in terms of behavior. And when it's written down as in its written form, it's much easier for people to stick to. It's kind of almost like this, anchor that kind of underpins everything that we are doing as a family. So I wanted to also share that we at Smart Families are going to be hosting some family workshops this coming January. It's going to look like a family dinner with a family workshop where we're going to invite you to come and attend. It's going to be facilitated by the Smart Family staff or by Dr. Collier. When we're going to talk a little bit about family values, and in that workshop, we'll be looking at what ways that we can create a family code, which is this concrete thing that we can have as a framework to help guide, behavior choices of our children. So when we think about values, it can be a hard question, and like a lot of people maybe haven't ever thought, what are my family values? And maybe we aren't a family that have had that conversation, but our values are kind of guiding principles that inform how you and your family make decisions. And I saw this really nice quote from this psychologist, Kelly McGonigal, and she explained that in the short term, writing about personal values make people feel more powerful, in control, proud, and strong. It also makes them feel more loving and connected, empathetic towards others. It increases pain tolerance, enhances self-control, and reduces unhelpful rumination after a stressful experience. Now, when I think about, ways that we respond to children when we ask them, or when they ask us, sorry, about having a smartphone, um, what we're actually doing is we're communicating some values to them. And so, if we haven't already had the conversation about what our family values are, sometimes what that can look like is kind of some resistance, some pushback. So I just wanted to take the next few slides to really talk about ways that we can embed family values in the responses that we give to our children. It helps us to be consistent with our messaging, and it really helps, like I say, to be this anchor that all whatever we communicate, we can pull it back to what are the values that underline it. So, family values can kind of be a little bit hard to think about. It's a very, very broad scope. So, over this holiday period, maybe this might be something nice that you can spend some intentional time talking about with your own family. So, some questions to consider, what's most important to our family, what fires up, what do we want to be known for? What do we want to model for others to look like? How do we spend our time? What words best describe our family and what are our strengths as a family? And so on here, I've put a list of some family values. Now, these slides will be available to you, as will the recording, but also you can do a quick Google search and lists of them will come up. But you're going to notice that when I talk about some responses, I'm actually going to draw back to some of these family values. You know, children are very inquisitive and they are very curious and they like to ask why, and they like to ask why many, many times. And so, again, this just helps us to be consistent with what we are sharing with the children. So, I also really would encourage people to be very proactive in approaching in how they prepare in advance for these conversations with your child. So again, depending on their age, spending some time really thinking beforehand what you want to share with the child helps, like I say, to be the consistent. It helps you to be resolute in your commitment and really well equipped to calmly engage with and respond to any expected or unexpected emotional reactions from your child. Now, as a parent of an eighth grader, I have heard "it's not fair" more times than I could ever imagine of hearing. So, being very intentional about, calmly responding and being resolute in, my commitment. These are my responses, and these are not going to change. It can be difficult for a child. Their brains are growing, they're becoming more dependent, and they see all of this growth in themselves. But ultimately, we are the parents and, we know more about the world. And sadly, what we know about online dangers could be very terrifying at times. So I put connect responses to your family values, explain that every family has its own rules and values. So your family values may not be identical to your friends' family values. That can help kind of guide some of those questions when they say, well, my friends have got this. And then you can explain that ultimately for your family, waiting until after 8th grade is the agreed upon age to own a smartphone. So just wanted to preempt some of these. So I'm going to walk through some of the most common reasons that children give to adults as, as part of their persuasive request that, they're ready to have their own smartphone. So one of the ones that we hear parents share a lot with us is that they are responsible enough to have their own smartphone. Now, when a child, or when your child communicates this to you, it's really important to validate them. As adults, we have very complex and often stressful lives, and so we can respond from a place, especially if we haven't prepared, what we want to say back to them in advance. We can sometimes say things that can feel very invalidating to the child, and especially as they're going through this window of opportunity, they've got so much brain restructuring going on. They're developing these things like executive functioning skills. And so just being very mindful that you want to, be respectful to their thoughts and opinions too. It will kind of help, navigate some of the conflict that may occur, that hopefully wouldn't occur, but may occur. We know that, like we've talked about, this unique brain development period is a time when it can be hard for them to regulate their emotions. And so that may look like this explosion when they don't get their own way. So you'll notice as well that I have started each of these responses with my number one job is to keep you safe. Now, the reason why I think that's a very pivotal thing for us to share is, like I've touched on already, as parents in this world and in this society, there is plentiful news that we hear about the dangers online now. Very real, very scary. We hear often about, mental health issues, things like child trafficking, grooming, sextortion, which is where children are manipulated to give images of themselves. And these are real dangers and real risks. And so our number one job is to keep them safe. Giving a child a smartphone is often a gateway to lots of these risky behaviors. And without them having the brain development to be able to, think about their own consequences or, think about what that risk might involve, it's up to us to be that person. So kind of again, this is a framework. You can use some of this, part of this, you can adopt this response that will suit your family best. Again, depending on the age of your child, you may just give a very small, succinct answer, or you may want to go into a little bit more. So one of the ways that I do this and keep you safe is by learning about your brain and how it develops. Although I recognize and see that you are demonstrating lots of the important skills that will help you become a responsible young adult, I also know that the part of your brain that helps you to think before you act is not fully developed until you're around 25 years old. This means that you could find yourself in a situation where you might engage in dangerous or risky behavior, say or do something online without thinking of the consequences, or, and this is a very valid or from what we know through our research, have friends who share something inappropriate with you because their brains are also not mature enough to think about the consequences. You are incredibly precious to our family, and we do not want to risk any of these things happening to you. So in that response, there are a few things. So I want to think about values. So this is a communication of values in what you're putting here. So you are really demonstrating and recognizing that in your family, there is a value of integrity. And so, for example, how you respond or how you act digitally and in the online world, is that going to match how you respond and how you act in the real world? And, around middle school is when we see a surge of instances of cyberbullying, because children's brains at this age haven't developed empathy in the same way as an adult brain. It's far easier for a child to either engage in some kind of cyberbullying where they are the instigator of this, or we have been learning a lot about group texting situations, which, although it's not social media, it's beginning to be viewed as a form of social media. Lots of the same things that happen on a social media platform can happen in these group texts, and the child could find themselves in a situation where they are, by association, part of a cyberbullying issue. Now, integrity, like this is, you are demonstrating a value of integrity. Because of your brain development, you are at risk of not having, being digitally and online behaving or exhibiting certain behaviors that would be the same as if you were in real life or face to face with people. Also, the value of empathy. It's a developing trait that they're still learning. So really just having some discussions around this. And also, we know that not a lot of people share what adolescent brain development looks like in a teenage brain. A lot of children don't know that this is how their brain is being restructuring in these things. And it can be very empowering for a child to learn more about their own body and their own brain and why they think the way they think, and, why some of these incidents do happen. So this is just kind of an example of how you can validate, yes, I'm seeing lots of behaviors in you and you are maturing and you are definitely demonstrating these things. However, just from what I know about brain development, we know as a family that you are not ready for this responsibility yet. You are not able to keep yourself safe in situations potentially that could cause you some harm. So this is kind of one of the examples. Okay. Another common thing we hear is that I'm going to miss out on all the things my friends are talking about and organizing if I don't have a smartphone. Now, again, this is this is a true, issue that lots of these children feel. Hyperconnectedness now is this real thing, and it's something that a lot of adolescents and teenagers almost use as kind of some social influence. For example, in platforms like Snapchat, having thousands of connections is almost seen as this, putting you higher up on this hierarchy of social status. But hyperconnectedness, is actually masking a lot of loneliness. And so it's a real thing that children can feel. If you're familiar with the phrase FOMO, so fear of missing out, many years ago when, we were in school, if there were events or things happening, it wasn't all over social media for us to see that we were missing out on these things. Maybe you would find out the following day when you'd gone into school and then were told about the event, but, that moment had passed. And so just kind of a response that you can do, validate the child. Yes, I understand. Yes, I'm sure it feels really tough that, to feel that way. But my number one job is to keep you safe. I do understand not having a smartphone can feel like you are missing out on things, and feeling this way can be very overwhelming and distracting. And the thing with the distraction part is, if a child is trying to engage in something, maybe they're doing an activity with their family and they're aware that all of this thing is going on, maybe their friends are somewhere and they do have this, fear of missing out. It can be very hard for them to stay present with the people that they are currently with. And so helping kind of mitigate that. So yes, it can be overwhelming and distracting. However, having a smartphone isn't the only way you can communicate with your friends. And I love the response we had in the chat room about the Gab phone. So I'm happy to talk more about other ways you can stay connected to them. Um, just during this time of adolescence is when children really start to gravitate towards social connections and friendships. So when we've studied peer pressure, between the ages of around 12 and 14 is where there is a gravitation towards children having more influence or being more influenced by their peers than by adults. So it's, again, window of opportunity when they are, developing these executive functioning skills. So what happens is that they want to be connected and it's a really important developmental stage for them. However, just as we mentioned the Gab phone, there are other ways to stay connected to them. Now, depending on the age of your child, you may follow up with, let's have a conversation about getting a family dumb phone that you can use to speak with friends or arrange plans, or I'm happy to speak with their parents to arrange for you to get together with them. So, as Hilary mentioned, last week we at Smart Families announced our smart solution. We listen to parents, and we take your responses and the conversations we have with you. And often what we heard from parents was that if we're not having the smartphone, like what can we do? Like we need a solution. And so we all undertook our own little research study. We all purchased our own dumb phone. And as a family, we trialed it out with our families. And so our solution that we put together, which is available on our website, if people haven't seen already, is the smart solution where you have a dumb phone, which is almost like a home phone, a bit like what we would have had many, many years ago when we were growing up. But you have this phone and it stays in the home. If you have a child that wants to connect with their friends, they can provide this number. It's limited with, what it can use the internet for. And also, it just helps the child to feel like they can still be connected. But it also is an important lesson for them to learn about privacy. It helps them be more accountable to, the conversation and content, what they are talking about. Especially if this phone is available for everybody in the home, there's nothing hidden on there. It's available for everybody. And so that's a perfectly great solution that you may want to use or maybe have a discussion around with your family. So let's think about values. You are communicating this to your parent. And if we kind of unpick the layers, there are definite values that you are sharing with your child. So the one you might be thinking about is kind of authenticity. This hyper connectedness, having thousands of friends or connections, but, really challenging them to think about, what is a friend? In our family, how do we define what a friendship is? And teaching them about the real value of human connection. Who are their core friendship groups? What is it that makes them a good friend? Who is it or what does it take to be an authentic friend? In our family, we are authentic. And really helping a child to learn that from their family and not kind of looking at, this trend of having all of these thousands of connections, but none of the meaningful connections. Also, it teaches the value of flexibility. In our family, we are flexible. So, yes, maybe you feel this way. We can find a flexible solution that's going to help you and validate you, but also is going to keep you safe. So just some things to think about. Now, our hope is that, if you are in this webinar with us, we hope you have either seen our presence at your school. What we really promote at Smart Families is, delay the smartphone till after 8th grade. And so it may well be that these friends that your child is talking about, their families are part of our Smart Family Pledge. And so it is not that, they may have also decided to undertake their smart solution. And so they may also have a dumb phone as a family phone. So, it's really important to, invest the time on learning about your child's friends. And that kind of links to the next one. So you may have heard this already, or maybe, you've just heard about this, but, all my friends have a smartphone. And I always pause here about the word all. And, this is hard to quantify with a teenager because I have heard all my friends before. And, sometimes adolescents like to overgeneralize what all could be. And it could be, it could be one friend, but for the purpose of this persuasive request, they're going to make it all. So all my friends have a smartphone. Again, it's hard not to feel surrounded by smartphones. Everywhere you look, there are smartphones. We're definitely in this, cusp, of the cultural change where, just like you are yourselves on this webinar with us, wanting to learn more and, kind of change what has been this trajectory for a long time so that we can, make a safer world for our children. So a response to this, again, just a framework, but again, my number one job is to keep you safe. Safety, safety, safety. I want you to have fun and to feel included, to understand your friends, and your desire to have a smartphone makes so much sense. But I can't let you drive a car until you're 16 or eat candy for your meals. And I also can't give you a smartphone. It can feel disappointing and seem like you're missing out, but you can do hard things. The rule isn't changing, and we're going to walk through it with you. And so again, validating, letting them know that I'm sure it feels tough. However, they can do hard things. And as a family, just sharing those values, kind of a value you might be able to embed here is thinking about resilience. We all want these children to be resilient. And so, taking back the conversation and explaining that to the child, there are ways you could be resilient. And this kind of leads nicely onto the final response. So you might have a child who shares with you, well, I need a smartphone because I might need to contact you when I'm at school, or maybe it's when they're somewhere else. Maybe they're at, a sports game, or they're somewhere else when they're not with the parent. Now, this is one that we can almost flip sometimes because when we speak to parents and parents explain a little bit about, what their needs are or their fears are, and, we spend a lot of time listening to parents. This can almost be reversed where a parent would say, well, I need to contact my child when they're at school. I need to contact my child, if I'm running late, or maybe I need to tell them something. And so this one kind of works both ways. So here's a potential framework or response we could use for this. So my number one job is to keep you safe. And when you are not with me, it's the responsibility of the adults who you are with to keep you safe. So your teachers and coaches are able to contact me if anything in your schedule changes. If your game or activity after school gets delayed, the adults will make sure that I am informed. If there's anything urgent that you need to contact me about whilst you're at school, you can speak to the nurse, you can speak to the office, and they can call me. I trust the people who are there with you to look after you. Now, when we have campuses where maybe smartphones are on campus, and we've spoken to lots of schools and we know a lot of the schools' policies, children put their phones away, especially, between school hours, but that can be very tempting for a child. And we have we get lots of feedback from staff at schools that, children are known to go into the bathrooms to use their smartphones, or if they hand them in, they hide them up their sleeve and they look like they hand the case in, but then keep hold of the phone, so they still have the phone on campus. But what happens in that situation is that, when we think about this window of opportunity and we've got this really critical time when children are developing these executive function skills, when a child has this convenient smartphone, what happens is when they're posed with any kind of issue or problem, they can have this default to just calling you at home. I'm going to call my mum. And if I can walk you a little bit down a nostalgic path to when, we were at school, and I'm going to speak for myself, but I'm going to assume there are people in here with me who were at school and didn't have any kind of smartphones or phones. If there was a time when you didn't have a PE kit, or maybe you'd forgotten your homework, or, any other little issues, when you're at school and you don't have the means to contact your parent, you actually develop the skills to become more resourceful, and you develop the skills to problem solve. You have to solve your own problems. There isn't this convenient reliance of, I'm just going to call my mum and, just going to call my dad and I'm going to get them to help solve the problem for me. It makes children more accountable when they have to resolve their own problems or solve their own issues. Now, again, as a teacher at a school for a long time, I know that if there are major things that need to be dealt with, absolutely, you will be informed, as and when. But for small things, it can just be very convenient for a child to call home. And so, this can also, I want to challenge this, like new kind of concept that we've seen recently in education where it can be very disempowering to a school and to staff if the children are almost navigating without the means of the responsible adults that are in the school, and they're kind of taking matters into their own hand. And ultimately it's not the responsibility of the child to be the go-between in that situation. Their adults are there are very strict protocols in place. If a child needs help, if a child is feeling sick, there are ways that you can be contacted. And so really just sharing that information with the child. Now, when you think about values, what are the values that we've embedded in this response? Well, we're talking about relationships. We value relationships. We value that the people who are around you, and that could be teachers, maybe it's a sports coach, maybe it's the friends' parents. Say if you've got a child who's not, they've gone out for the day with some friends' parents, I value the relationships of the people who we trust you with. And so, I trust that if there was an issue, our relationship is meaningful and they would contact me and I would be able to come and help you. Also things like trust, it kind of goes alongside relationships. And also, again, flexibility. We can be flexible. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes, things come up. You may be late picking your child up from somewhere, but, we know parents mostly have, some kind of means of communication, whether it's a smartphone or another device, they'll be able to contact school. So they were just kind of 4 examples of common things that we hear and ways that we can respond. But, my main messaging from this is to really think about the values that you are communicating. When you are very transparent and you can draw this back to the values that you're sharing with your child, it really does anchor them with a framework that they can draw back on. And, when they keep hearing these things, it's not that you're being mean. It's not that you're being unfair. It's not that you want to ruin their life or any of the other, very, huge, big, emotional things that you may hear in response to this. You can say that, we have family values that help guide our behaviors, and this is why I'm communicating this to you. Now, is it going to be a tough conversation? Possibly, yes. It's like a highly charged topic when it comes to smartphones, especially when, we are totally immersed in a world where smartphones are so prevalent. Now, I also want to just very quickly say, maybe you are a parent in here whose child has a smartphone, but you might have they have a younger sibling, you've got younger children who are coming up through a school, and it is perfectly okay to, decide that you want to change, the past. Maybe your child had a smartphone at a younger age and you don't want that for your subsequent children. And so, being very clear with these values and the way that you communicate this can just help, be proactive. We talk about proactive parenting, anticipating conversations before you have them. It just really helps as opposed to reactive parenting, where sometimes maybe you're caught off guard, you haven't thought about something. So there's a lot of power in, conversation. And, it's just, I think it's really important that we kind of share that. So, that's the end to that little section. I just want to do a little check-in with Hilary. Is there anything that I can, speak to, or has anybody shared any comments before I move on?
No. I think
No.
when you're ready to take questions and comments, just let everybody know. But Dean did share our smart solution. You can
Wonderful.
find it on our website, and it kind of breaks down the same exact topics that Sally has just gone over in detail. It's a little bit more abbreviated, but hopefully that will help anybody who wants to go back and consider getting a dumb phone for their family.
Yeah. And if, please use the chat if, you've encountered this smartphone question, if there's been a way that you've responded to your child, it's been something that's been well received, and, and you want to share it with the other parents in here, like, please do share. We love to hear your, responses and your approaches, because we really truly believe, the more we collaborate, the more empowered we feel. So please feel free to utilize the chat element whenever you need to. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go over before we kind of open up for some discussion after the
Hey,
gift guide. Oh, yes,
hey, Sally, can I say something? It's Brian
absolutely,
Cooper.
Brian. Hi, Brian.
Yeah. Hey. One other thing I would say is we do have a lot of reference stuff on our website, and that like Screen Strong is one of the podcasts that we recommend listening to for people. It really just kind of normalizes a lot of this language. The more you hear it over and over again, you just need to keep hearing that like this is the right thing to do, and that kind of affirmation, and just like all these things that Sally are saying, like, yes, obviously, like this is what we should be doing for our children. Uh, Frankly, we just need to hear it over and over again. And there's a lot of, um, we generate a lot of content, but there's a lot of other people out there that are doing this too. So, and we kind of reference that through our website, and so that's out there too.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. There's some amazing resources online. It's definitely this topic is one that is getting a lot of traction now, and a lot of parents really want to, equip themselves with, the education and the neuroscience that really helps, communicate effectively to the children, what their values are. So, yes, Screen Strong is an amazing resource, great podcast. I touched a little bit about group messaging and group chats that children are engaging in. Screen Strong have an incredible podcast just about this topic, which is really interesting if you find yourself maybe driving in the car and you just want something that different to listen to, but really gives us new perspectives on things that we know children are engaging in. And as parents, we maybe don't think the group texting thing is that much of an issue, but it's a really interesting new perspective. So definitely visit those sites too.
There is a 100% chance there will be a problem with group texting at your school over Christmas break.
Yes. And when we speak to a lot of counsellors at the schools, what we actually hear is there's a lot of things that occur in group texts or like group FaceTimes off campus, but actually the conflicts that occur off campus, kind of filter into the school, and then schools are dealing with the fallout, a lot of these things that have gone on. So, we have lots of parents whose children don't have social media. However, they are engaging in risky behaviors in this group chat setting. And the thing with the group texting is, some of these group texting groups can, have a surplus of like 40 children. And when they get to this level, and this is kind of what I was talking about, how in the first response about them being responsible enough for a smartphone, when you get to children communicating at this huge level, it's very difficult to manage content. It's very difficult to manage who is being added to these, group chats. And a lot of exposure to like inappropriate and illicit images will occur in these group chat situations where, somebody gets added and they share a photograph within this group chat setting. And then, your child has then been exposed to something, through a group chat. So, again, it's just something to be really mindful of. We can be very proactive about things like social media on smartphones, but definitely group chat is a new area where we are hearing more kind of issues there. Um, so on the holidays, I just wanted to kind of go over a few things for the holiday tech plan. So as we are approaching the holidays, I know a lot of schools are going to finish for Christmas this Friday. Now, when adults think about holidays, we kind of have this lovely Hallmark movie reference point of like family gatherings filled with food, fun, good conversations. Conversely, our children think of them in terms of freedom. So, freedom from the structures of bedtime, any sports practices, freedom from school, homework, and basically what it can feel like to them is freedom to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. And so, the problem with this is that the freedom often translates to dramatic increases in the amount of screen time children and teens engage in. And we know from a lot of research and data that excessive amounts of exposure to those like kind of tablet smartphones, video gaming, has been associated with a number of mental, physical, and social issues for children. Now, I just want to just pause here slightly just to say, here at Smart Families, we are not an anti-tech organization by any means. We see the value of technology in society, but what we want to talk about really is about balance. How can we find a balanced measure, like an approach to screens. And so I'm going to go over the next few slides. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just as we said with the how would you have the conversation with your child about, responses, about being proactive parents, in the same way that we really encourage you to have thought ahead about those conversations, we really encourage you to think ahead about, okay, what is my game plan for the holidays? What is it that I can communicate to my child ahead of the holidays so that it doesn't become this battle, where the child is, I'm free, I'm going to do all of these things, I'm going to spend all my time doing this, but really to set parameters around, okay, this is what it's going to look like these holidays. And I'd love to, really acknowledge the fact that you're on this webinar, and so you are very receptive and open to hearing these things, and maybe this is already an area that you've been thinking about. Again, if you've got any approaches or any practical tips, drop them in the chat and we can have a chat with them about them. So primarily what I would love to share, and when we consider screens, is moms and dads, it's really important that you are mindful of your own tech use. When we are telling our children, that we need to limit screen time and be mindful of how we're using our time online, what we often hear from children is, they will come to us, in our organization and talk to us about how much they see their parents using their smartphones. And so really, this is an opportunity for you, as well as your children and your family, to think, how can we just be more intentional with having more human interaction this holiday rather than having these screens. So things like having a screen off time each day. So plug them in somewhere away. If you're wearing a smartwatch, which, I have, we get so conditioned to feeling vibrations, because we're just constantly anticipating some kind of notification. Just remove any kind of distractions and have that screen off time. Just time when you can really invest in each other. Things like setting limits on how much time your child can have during the day. And this is something you can explicitly do ahead of time. One practical way that I know of is things like marbles. Maybe you give your child 4 marbles. Each marble is worth 15 minutes of screen time. They can cash in their marble to be given some screen time. That way the child can be accountable and they can kind of choose when they use their time, but that you've set the bigger parameter of how much time they're given. Using screens in common areas of the house. We really encourage no screens in bedrooms, no smartphones in bedrooms. It's just a time when children are particularly vulnerable. We know there are predators online who will, trying to access your child, and in the privacy of a bedroom, sometimes because of children's brain development, they just don't consider the risk in the same way the adults do, and they may engage in some conversations. So keeping things in public areas and common areas. So, just like I said, if you do have a family phone, make sure adolescents know that you have the right to check what they are using it for. A really good conversation to have around privacy, letting the children know, they may use these devices, but they don't own these devices. Therefore, you have a lot of say in how that they are used, and you're able to check them. And also being very open and telling the children that you check these help your child to develop these prefrontal cortex skills, proactively thinking about consequences, making them accountable to their behavior. Are they being a good digital citizen? Being aware of what they're watching, and also you may just decide this holiday to take a total digital sabbatical. So find some time where you're just totally unplugged and then intentionally go out to do something together as a family. So this could be as simple as going on for a walk, maybe walking through the neighborhood to see the Christmas lights. You may want to bake, or maybe, do some cooking together. But again, the more that you can proactively plan for this time, the more the more time you've got to communicate this to your child, so it doesn't feel like it's a punishment that they're having it taken away. You're actually supporting their neurological development, and you're creating really good, wholesome family experiences. Remember, use it or lose it. The more time they have with their family, the better they get at being with their family. And so just being really mindful of how you're going to be choosing to spend your time these holidays. And then finally, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just wanted to share that last week we also released our gift buying guide. We've really been thinking about values, and how the gifts that we buy can reflect the values that you have. We really want to challenge parents to not instantly go to Amazon and find out what the top 50 toys are this year. You know, I have been that parent in the past who has been scouring every store in Houston trying to find like this, you know, the hottest toy for the Christmas, only to have bought it for one of my children and then have used it for 5 minutes and it just completely fell flat. And so that was more about me buying into parental peer pressure, and, you know, like, and feeling like my child needed to have something that everybody else's child was going to have, rather than me thinking, well, you know what is it that my child will get the most value from, and how am I, you know, demonstrating that really what we gift to these children is going to help set up their own experience of gifting, and it's going to be make them more mindful of how they buy for people in the future. So we've kind of split them up into different sections. We've got art and exploration kind of gifts. We've got safe tech alternatives. So there are some amazing tech toys that are out there that are safe for your child. You know, many of these we have used. I've personally used these with my children. And then finally, we have experiences. You know, we've looked around Houston to see kind of what is out there, things like cooking classes for children. If people haven't been to the Almond Bio Nature Centre, it's somewhere I went a lot on field trips with my school. It's an amazing place. It's just such a wonderful place. Lots of different family experiences you can do there to gift. And then sports and outdoor toys, anything that gets children outside, you know, gets them in nature, you know, especially with sports things, you know, the skills that they learn through collaboration on a team, all these things develop amazing, healthy brains. So lots and lots of information on our website. Some of these things that I've spoken about. So I know I've just whizzed through that. I'm very mindful of time, and I'm going to pull and stop sharing mine. Okay.
Oh, good, Sally. That was a wonderful presentation. I often, even though I work with you, I always learn something new. And I have three children, um, one in sixth grade, and I get all of my beliefs and feelings reaffirmed every time I hear you speak.
Yep.
And so I appreciate you doing that. And we had a great question from the comment area. I did provide some personal experience and the work we've been doing about hearing from families who did give a smartphone to their child and then perhaps whatever the situation is decide to change. And so I provided the advice of sharing a dumb phone as the alternative. But is there any other suggestions you have for families in those situations?
Well, I think you know, we've lived in a time, you know, culturally in society where, you know, people in the past maybe, you know, one of the things I often share with parents is that what we do is we parent from our own, you know, foundation. And so when we were growing up, the physical dangers and physical risks far exceeded anything digitally or online because it was just, you know, in its infancy. And so often, you know, there are parents who've given their child a smartphone and, you know, we just underestimate the risks on there. And so, you know, we hear from parents who subsequently say, well, you know, I learned this information and I found out about these dangers. And so I subsequently chose to take the smartphone away. Now, you know, as an adolescent, you know, you're feeling very responsible and you're feeling all these things. It can absolutely, you know, and we understand it may cause conflict. But like Hillary said, this dumb phone, family phone is an excellent alternative. And also, you know, being very open with the reasoning behind why that happened, you know, validate them. You know, yes, I understand that maybe it feels very disappointing that you had something and now you haven't got it anymore. However, you know, here's our family values, here's what I know now. And especially things with brain development. If you do a YouTube search, there are some great adolescent brain development videos that you can sit with your child and say, hey, you know, like this is what I know now. And, you know, had I known this already, maybe that would have changed me giving it to you. And it's not that I don't necessarily trust you, but I just don't trust these other people who are online. And, you know, you are incredibly precious to me. You are so important to our family, and I can't risk anything happening to you, which again can be difficult for a teenager to hear potentially, especially as they're going through this surge of, you know, brain development and, you know, developing this independence. But, you know, I want to congratulate you because I'm sure that was, you know, a hard decision to make, but a good decision to make. And, you know, we never hear any parents ever share with us that they were glad they wish they'd given the child a smartphone earlier. You know, it's very much the opposite. So, yeah, I just want to congratulate you. That's a wonderful testimony. And, you know, I think in the future when, you know, these young adults grow up to become adults, you know, and they develop the empathy and they're able to, you know, see themselves in the parents' shoes more. You know, I think, you know, you've potentially protected your child from a whole number of, you know, risks that are online. So we just sometimes have to ride out those big emotions that we get that we experience from our children. So, you know, hold strong. So,
this person did not do that, but they asked, what would you do in that situation? So
oh,
just to
sorry.
clarify.
Yes.
No, just did one. Yeah.
Well, we do hear as well that parents do that. But I think I just want to touch on, you know, there are some really great monitoring apps, things like Bark. Bark have their own phone, but they also have a downloadable app that you can do that monitors what is on a phone or on a device. How that works is it has kind of some special technology that monitors the content. And so there are certain buzzwords that it will catch and it monitors everything outgoing and everything incoming. So, you know, this could even be something you put on, you know, an iPad if you have that. So if there was a word related to, you know, drugs, you know, alcohol, sexual content, you know, cyberbullying, it will actually take a screenshot of your child's screen and send it to you as the parent. And you can read the content of that conversation. And it actually sends you a little thing to say, you know, you may want to have a conversation with this. Now, we've had this on devices in our house and it's exceptionally, you know, good at. So my son, had a headache, and so he'd messaged on an iPad to me to tell me that, you know, he wanted some medication. Typical teenager, we were in the same house. However, it logged that it came up as medically concerning content and sent it to me to say your child is having, you know, please have a conversation because it's something around, you know, potentially drugs. So it's very, very accurate. It's just another way that, you know, we can safeguard children online if, you know, they do have devices. So but I'm a huge encourager of conversation, and don't be scared to talk about why you're having those conversations. Again, you know, maybe take some time this holiday to talk about like what are our family values, and make sure you sign up in January when you get the information about our family workshop, because that will definitely be coming your way very soon as well. I don't know whether if there are. Oh, go ahead, Brian. I was going to say if there are any final concluding words you would like to say.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Brian Kuzma. Me and my wife helped start Smart Families about 5 months ago, and I think it's really cool to see the progress we've made. We started at St. Vincent de Paul, and we're um, pretty far along there. And now we're in 19 schools, and Sally and Hillary and Dean are at it. And I just want to let everyone know that like this is why we exist. We exist so that when your kids get to high school, I mean, it's to help the kids now. You know, my kids are in 5th grade and 3rd grade, and that's why we started. We were like, okay, we see what's coming, and we got to get ahead of it. And we got ahead of it at our school, and it's overwhelmingly like nobody pushes back. There is zero pushback. There is no leg to stand on this issue. I think largely people just don't know and they're afraid to talk about it. So that's why we've kind of led off with education, and Sally's been a huge part of that. So that now when people know what's going on and they feel like they're actually empowered to tell other people what to do, like how they should be parenting and stuff like that. It's just like until they have that education, nobody. I think everyone kind of feels it in their gut, but until they've actually learned the science behind it, they don't really feel comfortable with it. So like that's a big part of what we're doing is doing that. And then I mean we started up this organization. We're in 19 schools now. I bet we'll be in 50 next year. And but I'm that's the other message I want to tell you is that like we're coming. Like we have just started, and within a year or two, like this is going to be normal behavior in Houston, Texas. Houston is just going to be different, and I think it's going to be awesome. I think we can do it because, you know, like one, I know this sounds really weird, but like Houston, there's a lot of people who have money, and there's a lot of people who are Christian that have money and just have a different outlook on human dignity and can kind of sense that it's under assault. And so, like, we're leading this through the private schools first, and then I think we get some traction through the private schools. We'll see what happens from there. And but I'm just really excited. There's been such great feedback that we've gotten from each and every school and a ton of parents. And like I said, don't be afraid to talk to other people. A lot of the content that we generate and give to you guys is to make it easy for you to just send to other people. So it's like, hey, yeah, like here's a link to this group chat podcast. Like, I thought this was interesting. This isn't how I didn't realize all of this stuff was going on. All of that stuff to empower you guys to be leaders wherever you're at and really take this on, like within your community and make your community like take ownership of it. Like these schools are small enough that you can create whatever normal behavior you want to in your school. And we're here to help you do that. And so don't hesitate to reach out, like and that's why Hillary and Sally and Dean are here. Like this is what they do all day long. So that was it. And and feel good. Like, I mean, like it's coming. Like this is the direction of technology. It's not going the direction of like how to use the technology. It's like how to, like protect yourself from manipulative uses. And like, I mean, today, I forget what the stat is. It's something like 1 in 3 high school girls is on an antidepressant right now. And that's just unacceptable as a society that's where we've come out. It's like, that's okay. And so I think I also want you to be emboldened by the same urgency that we feel. Like we all have kids, and it's like we can't wait 2 years, we can't wait 3 years to like fix our communities. Like this is like you're gonna save. You're just going to save so many kids at the end of this. You're going to save them from pornography addictions, video game addictions, all of the mental health illness that's kind of really ravaging the middle schools and high schools now. So like somebody's got to do something about it, and that's what we do. So that's it.
Thanks, Brian. Well, and I think as well, the holidays is a perfect time to be really intentional with changing up maybe past holiday experiences or things you've done in the past. Be intentional, plan ahead, and have those discussions with your family, and just make this holiday one that is full of connection. I think one of the things we're really trying to share with you all is the value of human connection. There are lots of things happening online where children are seeking connection, virtually. And so, just we wish you an amazing and Merry Christmas with your families, and we hope you have, a very restful and connecting time. And again, just thank you all for taking the time to be here today. We really, are so proud as an organization of the conversations that we're having and the movement that we're seeing. And it's just really great that you are all part of that too. So from me, I just want to say a great big thank you, and thank you for listening. That was a lot of talking that you all listened to, but the recording will be available. I know Hillary shared the PowerPoint. Please, share away to as many people. We just want to get the message as far and wide as we can.